Guys, welcome to Irish Medieval History. And this week, you guys, well, for a good few months now, you guys have been asking me to cover a book list on medieval Ireland. And I was like, that's a bit much to ask. And then some people were asking me, do you have just a general history book for Ireland? And for me personally, no. I just don't read big general books because personally for me, I just feel they give out a lot of misinformation. And also, they're trying to simplify very complicated topics. You have to remember, a lot happens in a day. And in Irish medieval history, it literally goes from 410 all the way to 1603. So that's a lot of information, a lot of different topics. And so I'm not a fan of general history books. I always like to, if I'm reading a specific topic like the Scottish War of Independence, I like to get books on the Scottish War of Independence, which in itself has a lot of different stuff going on. Although I prefer reading a general topic on that, a general history book that covers the Scottish War of Independence from A to B to get the basic skeleton of what's going on. Overall, I also just like to get specialized book, what did the Irish do during the Scottish War of Independence? And although I don't think that book has been written, there's plenty of articles on that, but I don't think that book has been written yet. I have to write that down. There is an idea of what to write in the future, although I wouldn't mind covering a book on the War of the Roses, another topic that needs to go into further detail. And that can be the problem sometimes. A lot of these books to do Irish medieval history for some reason hasn't been yet covered or written. So as we scan through this, you guys might ask me, oh, is there more books on this? Sadly, most of the time there isn't. Those books are still waiting to be written. We don't have the budget that our neighbours in England does. England has endless amount of medieval books and endless amount of resources to go into those books, from Oxford all the way to Edinburgh. They're always producing medieval books, and sadly Ireland is lacking behind, and that's why there's always misinformation to pick up on those spots online. So anyway, without further ado, if you are going down the path of Irish medieval history, it doesn't matter what you're doing really, in my opinion. I think you should read this book regardless, and that's A Guide to Early Irish Law by Fergus Kelly. In fact, I would advise you to read anything from Fergus Kelly. A Guide to Early Irish Law. That will set you straight to start with to see what's acceptable behaviour in Ireland in the medieval era. Especially going from the very start, from the early medieval period onwards, this book will set you straight. And going from that period, going from the start at 410, where we're going from the ancient Ireland into early medieval Ireland with St. Patrick and so on and so forth. An amazing book to read to understand how we're going into the early medieval period and the Celtic cultures that we had coming from mainland Europe into Ireland. A great book to read on that topic is the Celtic Heroic Age, which not only covers history from that early period of Ireland, but it also shows you Celtic culture. It is a topic that a lot of people get confused about, and hopefully people don't get too bogged down and confused on this one, as it goes straight into the sources themselves. And the importance of this book, and I know a lot of people, their criticism of the book is it's very Celtic focused, but that's the point of the book by John Carey. John Carey himself specialises in Celtic culture. He's from that whole line of Celtic historians who recently had to make massive changes after finding out that we're not in fact blood related to the Gaul of France, but in fact our culture is massively connected together. And what this book does is basically covers the connections between ourselves, Britain in particular, with Wales and Scotland, and also a good bit from France as well. Overall, I think this book is an amazing book, and I think it's a good place to start, especially if you're into the likes of Colonial, if you're into Finn McCool, and all that kind of stuff like that. I'd also happily advise, if you're on that whole taste of it, is definitely read the Early Irish Finn cycle as well. Although I should cover this book later on, because another book you should read with that as well, because this book in particular covers more of the Finn cycles, more of the Irish war bands. So if you happen to be a nice little Scandinavian or an American that's into Viking literature and stuff, our version of that, the Viking sagas, is the early Finn cycle. Although, on saying that, I would also connect it with this one as well. Early Irish kingship and succession, which explains, it goes into further detail into the succession of kings and actually explains how the high kingship works in Ireland during the early medieval period. And this literally goes all the way up to, how far does this go? I think it goes up to the Viking Age, and a bit of a blur as well. Covers a good bit of the Viking Age from last time I checked. Quickly scan through it. Yeah, goes up to the start of the Viking Age. Oh, sorry, 1022. Goes as far as 1022. Who knew? Regardless, as you're making the transition then, we're going from 410. We've got a bit of books there to cover. Then we transition into the Viking Age around 793. But we go into the Viking Age, one of the best books to read on Irish Vikings. This is like the Bible of it all. Viking Kings of Britain and Ireland, the Dynasty of Eivor to AD 410 by Clare, Downham. If you're into Vikings, this has to be in there, right? I'd also highly read this to even start with. Definitely read this. Definitely read the Guide to Early Irish Law with that. The problem I find with a lot of people is that they read this book and don't read A Guide to Early Irish Law, so they have a very much like just Norse interpretation of the world around them. Read the two books, get the full picture of what's going on in Ireland and Britain at the time. When you're with that, because you'll be in an Irish Viking mood, a Hiberno-Scandinavian mood, definitely read the sagas that go with it, such as the Orkney Saga, a history of the Earls of Orkney, and also read Niall Saga as well. Sadly, I've got on Kindle, but I think I got on Kindle, I'm not sure. I do have the actual book at home. I didn't bring it over with me to Japan, so I don't have it on me. Very heartbroken about that, but what can you do? As you move into that as well, one book I actually forgot to go back on. If you're still just before the Viking era kicks off, Ireland in the medieval world, AD 400 to 1000. If you're into pre-Viking stuff, 100% a must. Absolutely love this book. It covers a lot of Roman goods and finds in there, and the connection with Rome, with St. Patrick. I don't think there's much on St. Patrick itself, but it covers a lot of really, really interesting topics that I absolutely loved. As we go further away from the Viking Age, because I just finished off the Viking Age, then I've confused you for a wee bit, but hopefully you're not too confused as we go from the Viking Age into the Norman period. There is one book in particular, which is Damien Bracken's book, which covers that period between the Viking Age and the start of the Norman period, the reform of the Irish Church. It's when then the Norman conquest comes in, which is Gerald of Wales, A History and Topography of Ireland. There is one other book I thought I had on me, but I can't find it right now, which is Early Irish Sagas. Read the two of them together. I was reading the two of them at the same time, and I did notice that there were similarities between the two. And in my opinion, I think Gerald of Wales had spent more time drinking in Ireland than he did travelling and making up a lot of stories. Basically what this book is a justification of genocide by the Cambro-Normans when they come in, the Normans from Wales. Disturbing book. When you actually, when you read it through the first time, you think it's a bit of a comedy, but when you realise that this is a justification for genocide, yeah, it's a book that, especially if you're Irish like myself, it's difficult not to get very annoyed and angry at this. But I think it's a book that every Irish person should read. And given the events that's happening right now, read with caution is what I say, because it will definitely get the old blood flowing. And now that we've gone into the Norman period, Colony Ireland, 1069 to 1369. Not that big. Its predecessor, which I have over there, Ireland under Norman rule. The problem with that one is it's way too biased. It was written, I think it's written around 1921 when there was a lot of nationalism going on. This is way less bias. Just gives you the history itself of the Norman conquest of Ireland. And it does explain why the conquest eventually does start to collapse and so on and so forth, and how the Normans start becoming the Anglo-Irish. And while you're on the topic of the Normans becoming Gaelicized and becoming the Anglo-Irish, Government, War and Society in Medieval Ireland is obviously an amazing book. There is one book I'm missing. This is what you should read before this. Gaelic and Gaelicized Ireland in the Middle Ages. A bit of good news. This book, Richard II and the Irish Kings. If you're proper into the Irish pushing out the English, this is definitely the book to read. It has a nice happy ending. I like the ending to this one a lot. I won't spoil it too much, but if you're mad into your Irish history, that's definitely the book to get. 100%. Really like the ending to this one. This is a happy ending. Not so much with this one. This one sort of has a sad ending. The Geraldines and Medieval Ireland. My favourite book. It is one of my favourite books of all time. I am, if you haven't noticed, very biased towards the Anglo-Irish family that is the Geraldines. And that's pretty much it. Moving on to the Tudor period. I don't have too many Tudor books on me right now. I would definitely advise Jim O'Neill's 9-Year War. If you're wanting to put that in the category of medieval Ireland, because it's more going into the early modern period. Although myself, I do like to conclude my medieval history by going into 1603, just to tie up the loose endings. But as a lot of people point out, but then what period is the medieval period coming to an end? Because you could easily end Irish medieval history in 1450. Regardless, that's the list I have. That's basically it. That covers a lot of books that I have like in the background of my videos and stuff while I'm here in Japan. And that's kind of a basic reading list that I would give personally. I know for a fact people would give completely different reading lists altogether. And I also really would love to hear what people would have to say in the comment section. Or if there's other books that like you really want to specialize in stuff, definitely comment below when I get time, because I've recently got a job as an English teacher now, so I'm lacking a wee bit of time that I would normally have. But regardless, I really enjoy making these videos, so don't worry about me stopping making these videos and stuff. I'm still going to do that, but they won't be YouTube entertaining. They'll just be like fucking regular videos. Anyway, regardless, thanks very much guys, and as always, subscribe.